Hey, Intro to Accounting. Today we're going to look at Chapter 4, Section 3, and we're going to be journalizing, correcting entries, and correcting posting errors. So let's jump right in. First thing that we have here is our correcting entry. And when we have a correcting entry, we're going to need a source document, right? That source document is going to allow us to know what exactly happened. So for this here, for our correcting entry, we're going to use a memorandum, okay? And a memorandum is a perfect tool for this because it gives us that little section to write in what occurred. So you can see this as a cash payment of $120 for advertising, March 31st, was debited in error of a miscellaneous expense. So right there, when we go back to that source document, it's going to tell us exactly what this transaction is all about, right? This correcting entry. So it says errors discovered before entries are posted may be corrected by ruling through the item as described in Chapter 3. So remember, we journalize and then we post. So if we never posted to our ledger, we can just simply cross off those items and correct it just like we did in Chapter 3. Now, let's say we do post it to our ledger, right? Now, that is going to be something a little different. Now we actually have to create another entry to correct that one. So that's where the source document kind of comes in. It even says, however, a transaction may have been improperly journalized and posted to the ledger. In such a case, the incorrect journal entry should be corrected with an additional entry called a correcting entry. So what that means is we're creating a whole new entry. We're not crossing anything out if it's already been posted. So here we go. We're going to use this memo. If we look here, here is our next journal entry for a correcting entry. And there's probably two big things that I'd want you guys to take a look at here. The first thing is, what did we do in the original improper or incorrect entry, right? We need to know how the accounts were affected. So here it says on April 17th, we discovered that a payment of cash for advertising in March was journalized and posted in error as a debit to miscellaneous expense instead of advertising expense. So let's just look at that for a second. What happened is we debited miscellaneous expense when we weren't supposed to. So what happens to that miscellaneous expense when we debit it? It increases. We need to undo that damage. So right away, what are we going to have to do to miscellaneous expense? Well, we're going to have to credit it because we debited incorrectly. We just do the opposite. That's it. Now we're going to credit that miscellaneous expense. Now the other thing is, what were we supposed to do? That's the other part of this transaction. So it says, discovered that a payment of cash for advertising in March was journalized and posted in error as a debit to miscellaneous instead of advertising expense. So what we want to do here is we want to increase advertising expense. That is the correct entry that we wanted to post right away, right initially. If all things would have went well, that's what we would have done. So how do we increase an expense? We debit it. So when you look here at the transaction that we have, we put in our date, then we put in advertising expense because we're going to increase that. So we're going to debit it. And we put in our miscellaneous expense. We credit that because we're doing the opposite. And then we put in our source document, okay? And remember that source document is going to be a memorandum because it allows us to write in what exactly occurred. So this is just kind of walking us through that. Next, it says correcting an error in posting to the wrong account. So now if we've actually posted to the wrong account, if we look over here, right? And this is in our general journal, right? So we would record another journal entry to changes. But if we've actually posted to our ledger, and you see here we have supplies and prepaid insurance. If we posted to the ledger incorrectly, well, we're going to have to remove that, okay? And remember, we're writing all this in pen. We don't just automatically, we don't just erase it, right? We're going to have to cross it out. So let's see, does it give us something? It says a line should be, or sometimes an error in posting is made but not discovered until additional postings have been made to the account. So you can see here that it looks like we're supposed to record this in supplies, a debit in supplies, but instead we recorded it in prepaid insurance. And this transaction took place on the 12th. If we look at supplies, we've already had a transaction on the 15th. So you can see, for example, assume that debit to supplies was incorrectly posted to a debit of prepaid insurance. That's exactly what I just explained. A line should be drawn through the incorrect posting in prepaid insurance. So you see, we just draw a line across the entire thing, a clear, concise line. The correct posting should be made on the next available line in the correct account, supplies. And I put a little note here. It says this is the time when it's okay to not be in perfect chronological order, okay? Because we're not going to erase everything here, so we can put the 12 in, right? So this is a correcting entry, and you can see that it goes 2, 15, and then 12. Now, hopefully we're not doing this all the time. This isn't something that we want to be a normal practice, but you can see here that we posted in the next available spot. So this, in fact, will be out of chronological order. It does not give you an okay to constantly be recording entries outside of chronological order. This is kind of an exception, not the norm. So there we go. We look here, it says correcting an incorrect amount and an amount posted to the wrong column. So other errors here can be made when posting. And you can see this is in miscellaneous expense. An incorrect amount may be entered in the account. An amount may be entered in the wrong column. All corrections should be made in a way that leaves no questions to the correct amount. So if it's an incorrect amount, you can see that's here with these couple steps. So on May 6th, we put in $450 when it's supposed to be $45. All we're going to do is draw a line straight across it, and above it, we write in the correct amount. All right, and then after that, though, this is why it's a little bit different than Chapter 2. We write in the correct balance because we wouldn't have been balancing in Chapter 2, right? So we must follow up and actually correct the balance as well. For the one on the 31st, it looks like we wrote it as a credit instead of a debit. So for this, we can literally draw a straight line through the incorrect entry. We can write the correct entry and then update the balance. Okay, so this is just when it's in the wrong column or the wrong numbers. If you look previously, this was in the wrong account. So here we had to erase an entire thing and move it somewhere else, right? We had to erase an entire entry and move it somewhere else. Here it's just posting the wrong account or the wrong column. All right, so that is 4.3, just a quick little lesson that's pretty much telling us how we can correct entries. If there's a big takeaway here, it is going to be make sure that you look at the previous transaction and see what you did, all right? See what the incorrect entry was, because what's really gonna happen is we're gonna have to flip that, okay? We're gonna have to do the opposite, and then we will have to record the correct entry after that. It's really just those two things, though. So let's move towards the work together. All right, so here's our work together. It says journalize each correcting entry discovered during December of the current year. Use page 21 of the journal. So all we have here is the transactions, and then there's a little problem below it. So make sure that you're doing both of these. It says on December 1st, so let's put in December 1st here. Sure that we put in December because it doesn't look like anything else is on here. It says discover that a transaction for supplies bought last month was journalized and posted in error as a debit to prepaid insurance instead of supplies. So I look at this and I go, okay, prepaid insurance and supplies, those are both assets. Transaction for supplies bought last month was journalized and posted in error as a debit to prepaid insurance. So prepaid insurance was debited. I know that prepaid insurance is going to need to be credited. So supplies, though, was actually the account that needed to be debited. So I'll put supplies in here for 75, and then and it'll be debited because that's what it intended to do, because we bought an asset. And then let's put prepaid insurance in next. And here, because we debited prepaid insurance, it's like we need to bring prepaid insurance back to 0 is what it really comes down to. So we'll put 75 in credit because it's the opposite. What document number is it? It's M15. Next transaction on the first, it says discovered that a transaction for rent expense for last month was journalized and posted in error as a debit to repair expense instead of rent expense. So we wanted to increase rent expense, which would have been a debit, and we instead debited repair expense. So the first thing we need to do is we need to debit rent expense. That's the correct transaction. So let's put in rent expense. And it was 900. And now we need to bring that repair expense. We need to decrease this by $900. Kind of bring that repair expense back to 0. And this was memo number 16. It says it was also discovered that 2 posting errors were made in the owner's drawing account. Okay, the November 15th entry should have been $540. The November 30th entry included a debit of the drawing account for $400 that was posted in error as a credit. Determine what amount should be entered in each lettered cell. If a cell should have a 0 balance, it should be left blank. Now for me, like reading through this once, I'd have to read through it again, okay? You just kind of take your time going through it. So 2 posting errors were made. The November 15th entry should have been 540. Okay, so it looks like it's just a number, okay? So it would be 540 instead of 450 here. Credit would still say the same. And then the balance would still be 540. For D, it looks like the November should have been 540. The November 13th entry included a debit to the drawing account for 400 that was posted in an error as credit. So it looks like E here should be a debit. Okay, so let's move E here would be the 400, and then credit would be nothing. And then G, it's actually looking at the balance there. So what would actually occur? Let's take a look at our calculator here. So right now, what we have is we'd have a debit balance of 540, right? Because we just changed that previous account. So we have a debit balance of 540, and we now have another debit of, what was it, 400, right? So 540 plus the 400 is 940 here as a debit balance. And then H would be nothing. So let's take a look, save and continue. And we can kind of skip over this one. Well, you can't, I can, right? Well, let's grade it. And there we go. We got a 5 out of 5. So make sure that you're updating that balance that's down here as well, right? I can see some people maybe using the old numbers there when you're kind of updating this. So that is the work together. When you get to the on your own, I just graded it. It's going to be the same thing, right? Very, very similar. And the other thing, we have our application problem. Just to kind of pull it up and show you, it's the same stuff, okay? Same stuff. So that's the application problem 4-3. The other thing that I just want to show you real quick is the study hall. We have this chapter study guide. I would like you to complete the entire thing, okay? The crossword puzzle's not very big. So accounting terms, concepts and practices, true and false, right? You guys know that stuff. And then here, it kind of asks you to go back and forth and see what would be posted in each. So for the journal here, when it looks like the date, okay, so this would be the date column. It says, what would go there? Well, column B would go there, right? So it's just asking that you know the correct parts. So it's a little bit funny. It's just testing your knowledge, though, on understanding the different parts of the general journal and the general ledger accounts and how they're related. And then the last thing is that crossword puzzle. So that's what you're going to be completing today, is going to be 4.3 and the study guide. If you would like, you can continue on to the mastery problem. Totally up to you though, okay? So if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.